Think about the last time you wanted to snap at someone, eat something you knew wasn't good for you, or scroll on your phone instead of doing what actually mattered. That pull you felt? That's the same force that decides whether you build the life you want or watch it slip away, one small moment at a time. Here's something most people never realize. The difference between the person who reaches their goals and the person who doesn't isn't talent, luck, or even intelligence. It's the quiet ability to pause for 1 second before reacting, to choose the harder thing when the easier thing is right there, calling your name. In this audiobook, you're going to learn why your brain fights against your own best interests and what you can actually do about it. We'll walk through real, practical ways to strengthen your resolve, so saying no to distractions and yes to your goals stops feeling like a constant battle. You'll hear stories of people who turned their weakest moments into their greatest strengths, and you'll pick up tools you can start using today, not someday. By the end, you won't just understand self-control, you'll feel the shift in how you handle stress, temptation, and the small decisions that quietly shape your entire future. So get comfortable, take a breath, and let's begin. Chapter 1. Master your mind before you try to master your life. Somewhere inside every person, there is a battle happening right now. It is not loud, it does not make headlines. Nobody claps when you win it, and nobody notices when you lose it. But this battle decides everything about how your life turns out. It is the battle between your mind and your circumstances, and here is the truth that most people never learn until it is too late. The moment you win the war inside your own head, you win the war outside it too. You have probably heard people say that life is unfair, that some people get lucky breaks and others do not, that certain people were simply born into better situations. There is truth in that, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But here is something equally true, something that changes everything once you understand it. Two people can face the exact same hardship, the exact same loss, the exact same failure, and walk away with two completely different lives. One person collapses under the weight of it. The other person uses it as fuel. The difference between them is not luck, it is not talent, it is not even opportunity. The difference is what happens inside their mind, in the moments after life hits them hard. This is why mastering your mind has to come before mastering your life. You cannot build a strong house on a weak foundation. You cannot expect calm decisions from a chaotic mind. You cannot expect steady action from someone who is being tossed around by every emotion that shows up uninvited. Your mind is the operating system running underneath everything you do. Your habits, your relationships, your career, your health, your finances, all of it runs on top of that system. If the system is broken, everything built on top of it will eventually break too. Think about the last time you made a decision you regretted. Really think about it. Chances are, it did not happen because you lacked information. It happened because in that moment, your emotions were driving the car, and your mind was sitting in the back seat with no say in where you were going. Maybe you said something out of anger that you could not take back. Maybe you gave up on something too soon because frustration convinced you it was hopeless. Maybe you spent money you did not have because for a moment, feeling good mattered more than thinking clearly. None of these moments happened because you are a bad person. They happened because your mind was not in control. Something else was driving. This is the first thing you need to accept, clearly and without excuses. You are not always in control of what happens to you, but you are always responsible for how you respond to it. This single idea has carried people through prison cells, through the loss of everything they owned, through betrayal, through sickness, through war. It is not a soft idea. It is not motivational fluff meant to make you feel good for 5 minutes before you forget it. It is a survival tool. It is the difference between a person who breaks and a person who bends and keeps moving forward. There is an old idea, one that has survived thousands of years because it works, that says some things in life are within your power and some things are not. Your health can be affected by things outside your control. Other people's opinions of you are outside your control. The economy, the weather, what your boss decides, what your family says about you behind closed doors, all outside your control. But your thoughts, your effort, your reactions, your decisions in this exact moment, these are entirely yours. Nobody can take them from you unless you hand them over willingly. Most people spend their entire lives fighting for control over things they will never be able to control, while completely neglecting the one thing that was always theirs to command. They argue with people who were never going to change their minds. They replay conversations from years ago, trying to rewrite history that cannot be rewritten. They worry about outcomes days, months, even years into the future, outcomes that depend on 100 variables outside their reach. And while they are busy fighting these unwinnable battles, the one battle they could actually win, the battle for their own mind, goes completely unattended. Here is what mastering your mind actually looks like in real life, not in theory, but in practice. It looks like waking up and noticing the first thought that enters your head, and instead of letting it run wild, asking yourself if that thought is helping you or hurting you. It looks like feeling anger rise in your chest during an argument, and instead of speaking immediately, taking one slow breath before you say a single word. It looks like facing a setback at work, feeling the sting of disappointment, and then asking yourself a single powerful question: what can I actually do about this right now? Not tomorrow, not in theory, but right now, in this moment, with what you have. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending you do not feel anything. That is not strength, that is avoidance. And avoidance always catches up with you eventually. Real mental mastery is not about feeling nothing. It is about feeling everything, and still choosing your response with clarity, instead of letting the feeling choose for you. Anger is allowed to visit. Sadness is allowed to visit. Fear is allowed to visit, but none of them get to make your decisions for you. None of them get to sit in the driver's seat. Think about the people you admire most, whether they are athletes, business owners, parents, or ordinary people you have met in your own life who carry themselves with quiet strength. What do they have in common? It is never that bad things do not happen to them. Bad things happen to everyone. What sets them apart is how quickly they recover, how clearly they think during chaos, and how consistently they choose action over despair. This is not a personality trait some people are born with and others are not. It is a skill, and like every skill, it can be built, practiced, and strengthened over time. Start with this practice, and start today, not next week, not after you finish reading this book. Every morning, before you check your phone, before the noise of the world reaches you, take 5 minutes in silence. Sit with your own thoughts. Ask yourself what kind of person you want to be today, not in some distant future, but specifically today. Ask yourself what one thing you can do today that your future self will thank you for. This small practice, done consistently, begins to train your mind to lead instead of follow. You are teaching yourself, day by day, that you decide the direction of your thoughts instead of your thoughts deciding the direction of you. Next, build the habit of pausing before reacting. This sounds simple, and it is simple, but simple does not mean easy. When something upsets you, when someone says something that stings, when a plan falls apart in front of your eyes, train yourself to take one breath before you respond. That single breath creates a gap between the trigger and your reaction. Inside that gap is where your power lives. Without that gap, you are simply reacting the way a mirror reflects light, instantly and without thought. With that gap, you become someone who chooses their response deliberately, like a person standing at a crossroads, calmly deciding which path serves them best. Another practice that changes everything is learning to separate facts from stories. When something difficult happens, your mind immediately starts writing a story about it. Someone does not reply to your message, and your mind writes a story that they are angry with you, or that you have done something wrong, or that the relationship is falling apart. But strip away the story and look only at the fact. The fact is simply that they have not replied yet. Everything else is a story your mind created. usually built from fear rather than truth. Training yourself to separate fact from story protects you from suffering over things that may not even be real. Journaling is another powerful tool, not for the sake of writing pretty sentences, but for the sake of getting your thoughts out of your head and onto paper where you can actually examine them. When a thought stays trapped inside your mind, it grows louder and heavier the longer it sits there. But the moment you write it down, you create distance between yourself and the thought. You can look at it, question it, and decide whether it deserves the weight you have been giving it. Spend a few minutes each night writing about what challenged you that day, how you responded, and how you wish you had responded. Over time, this practice sharpens your self-awareness in a way that few other habits can match. Real-world application matters more than theory. So picture this: a man loses his job unexpectedly. His first instinct is panic, followed by anger toward his employer, followed by fear about how he will support his family. All of these feelings are valid and human, but this is the moment where mental mastery either shows up or it does not. If he lets panic and fear run the show, he might make rushed decisions, lash out at people who do not deserve it, or spiral into hopelessness that paralyzes him from taking any action at all. But if he pauses, breathes, and asks himself what is actually within his control right now, a different path opens. He cannot control that he lost the job. He cannot control the economy, but he can control updating his resume today. He can control reaching out to 3 contacts this week. He can control how he shows up in an interview next month. This is not about pretending the situation is not hard. It is hard. But hardship handled with a clear mind produces far better outcomes than hardship handled with a chaotic one. Or picture an athlete standing at the free throw line with the game on the line, thousands of people watching, hearts pounding in the crowd. The athlete who wins in that moment is rarely the most talented person on the court. It is the person whose mind stays quiet and focused while everyone else's mind would be screaming with pressure. That quiet, focused mind was not given to them by luck. It was built through thousands of hours of training their mental response to pressure, the same way they trained their physical shot. This is available to you too, in whatever arena you are fighting in, whether that arena is a boardroom, a classroom, a hospital room, or your own living room during a difficult conversation with someone you love. Understand this clearly, because it matters more than almost anything else in this book. You will face days that knock the wind out of you. You will face people who disappoint you, situations that humiliate you, losses that shake you to your core. This is not a maybe. This is a guarantee that comes with being alive. The question was never whether hard things would happen to you. The question is who you will be when they do. Will you be someone controlled by whatever storm shows up, tossed around like debris in the wind? Or will you be someone who has trained their mind to stay steady, clear, and focused, no matter what is happening around them? This is the foundation everything else in this book will be built on. Every principle of discipline, every habit of self-control, every strategy for staying calm under pressure, all of it depends on this first truth sinking in deeply. You must master your mind before you can master your life. Not after you get the perfect job, not after your circumstances improve, not after people start treating you the way you deserve. Right now, exactly where you are, with exactly what you have, you can begin training your mind to lead instead of follow. Start today, not with some massive transformation that demands perfection from the very first hour. Start small. Notice one thought today and question whether it serves you. Pause one time today before reacting to something that upsets you. Write one sentence tonight about how you handled a hard moment and how you want to handle the next one better. These small actions, repeated daily, are how mental mastery is actually built, not through one dramatic moment of willpower, but through the quiet, consistent choice to lead your mind instead of being led by it. Your life has not yet reached its final chapter. Whatever has happened up until this point, whatever mistakes, setbacks, or painful moments have shaped your story so far, none of that determines what happens next. What determines what happens next is the mind you bring into each new moment. Train it, strengthen it, take responsibility for it. Because once you learn to master what happens inside your head, you gain the power to shape what happens in your life. This is where everything begins. Chapter 2. Recognize the hidden triggers that control your daily reactions. There is a moment that happens before every single reaction you have ever had in your life. A moment so small and so fast that most people never even notice it exists. Something happens. A comment lands wrong. A message goes unanswered. Someone raises their voice, or worse, someone goes completely silent when you expected a response. And in that tiny sliver of time, something inside you fires off before your conscious mind even has a chance to weigh in. That firing is called a trigger, and until you learn to recognize it, it will continue running your life without your permission. Most people believe their reactions are simply who they are. They say things like, "That is just how I am, I have always had a short temper," or "I cannot help it, I just shut down when people criticize me." But these are not fixed personality traits carved into your identity. These are learned patterns, built over years, often decades, usually formed long before you were old enough to understand what was happening to you. A trigger is not your character, it is a switch, installed somewhere in your past, that gets flipped by something in your present. And the moment you understand this, you gain something incredibly powerful, the ability to see the switch before it flips you. Think about the last time you snapped at someone over something small. Maybe your partner left dishes in the sink again, and you exploded with an intensity that felt out of proportion to the dishes themselves. That intensity was not really about the dishes. Something about that moment touched a nerve that had been sitting there long before this relationship even began. Perhaps a childhood memory of feeling unheard, or a past experience of feeling disrespected. The dishes were simply the spark. The gasoline had already been sitting there, waiting. They rarely announce themselves clearly. They disguise themselves as reasonable reactions to whatever is happening in front of you. Your mind convinces you that your anger is entirely about the situation at hand, when in reality, the situation only accounts for a small percentage of what you are feeling. The rest comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere older, somewhere you have not fully examined. Here is why this matters so deeply for your daily life. If you do not know what triggers you, you will spend your entire life reacting instead of choosing. You will apologize for outbursts you do not understand. You will damage relationships over moments that seemed small from the outside but felt enormous on the inside. You will make decisions driven by an old wound instead of the actual present moment standing in front of you. And worst of all, you will blame the world around you for your reactions, when the real work was always available inside you. Recognizing your triggers begins with a practice that feels uncomfortable at first, but becomes one of the most valuable habits you will ever build. Pausing after a strong reaction and asking yourself a simple question: what just happened right before I felt this way? Not what happened in general, but specifically, what words were said, what tone was used, what silence stretched on too long. Get specific. The more precisely you can identify the moment your emotional temperature rose, the more clearly you can see the trigger hiding underneath it. Once you identify the moment, ask a second question, one that requires real honesty. Does the size of my reaction match the size of what actually happened? If someone forgets to text you back and you feel a flicker of mild annoyance, that matches. But if that same missed text sends you into hours of anxious thinking, replaying every possible reason they might be ignoring you, imagining worst-case scenarios about the relationship ending, that mismatch is a signal. It tells you that this reaction is not fully about the text message. Something older is speaking through this moment. Common triggers show up more often than people realize, and learning to name them takes away much of their power. Feeling disrespected is one of the most common triggers there is. Someone interrupts you, dismisses your idea, or speaks to you in a tone that feels condescending, and suddenly you feel your chest tighten and your voice want to rise. Feeling ignored is another powerful trigger, especially for people who grew up feeling unseen or unheard by the people who were supposed to care for them. Feeling criticized, even gentle, well-meaning feedback, can trigger people who spent years being harshly judged and never felt good enough. Feeling out of control is another massive trigger, especially for people who experienced chaotic or unpredictable environments earlier in life. When plans suddenly change, or when someone else makes a decision that affects them without asking first, their body responds as though there is real danger present, even when there is none. Here is something important to understand about triggers that most people miss entirely. The intensity of your reaction is rarely about the present moment. It is almost always a message from your past, wearing the costume of your present circumstances. When you feel a reaction that seems too big for the situation, do not immediately judge yourself for overreacting. Instead, get curious. Ask yourself, when is the earliest time in my life I remember feeling exactly this way? Often, without much digging, a memory will surface. Maybe it takes you back to a parent who dismissed your feelings as a child. Maybe it takes you back to a friendship that ended in betrayal. Maybe it takes you back to a time you were embarrassed in front of people whose opinion mattered deeply to you. This memory is not an excuse for your reaction. It is information, and information is power. Once you know your triggers, you gain the ability to prepare for them before they happen, rather than being caught off guard every single time. This is where real transformation begins. If you know that feeling excluded is one of your biggest triggers, you can prepare yourself before attending situations where exclusion might happen, like a family gathering, where certain relatives tend to leave you out of conversations. Before you walk into that room, you can remind yourself internally, if I feel excluded tonight, that old feeling is going to rise, and I do not have to let it control my night. This single act of preparation changes everything about how you experience the moment when it actually arrives. Another practical tool that works remarkably well is creating physical awareness of your triggers before they fully take hold. Your body almost always knows before your mind catches up. Tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, a racing heartbeat, shallow breathing, these are the early warning signs that a trigger has been activated. Train yourself to scan your body throughout the day, especially during conversations that carry any emotional weight. The moment you notice your body tightening, that is your signal to slow down before you speak or act. This is not weakness. This is one of the most disciplined things a person can do, choosing awareness over automatic reaction. Breathing plays a massive role here too, not as some abstract wellness suggestion, but as a literal biological tool. When a trigger fires, your body shifts into a stress response, flooding you with chemicals that prepare you to fight or to flee. Slow, deep breathing directly counters this response, signaling to your nervous system that you are safe, even when your emotions are telling you otherwise. The next time you feel a trigger rising, place your feet firmly on the ground. Take one slow breath in through your nose, hold it for a moment, then release it slowly through your mouth. This alone can bring you back from the edge of a reaction you would have regretted. Real-world application of this looks different for every person, but consider this scenario. A woman receives feedback from her manager about a project she worked hard on. The feedback is fair and even somewhat gentle, but she feels her face grow hot and her mind immediately jump to thoughts of quitting, of being fundamentally bad at her job, of never being good enough. If she does not recognize this as a trigger tied to years of feeling criticized as a child by a demanding parent, she will likely respond defensively, damaging her relationship with her manager and missing valuable growth from the feedback itself. But if she pauses, recognizes the size of her reaction does not match the size of the feedback, and takes a breath before responding, she creates space to hear the actual message being delivered, separate from the old wound it accidentally touched. Or consider a man whose friend cancels plans last minute for the third time this month. His mind instantly floods with thoughts that his friend does not value him, that he is being treated as an afterthought, that people always eventually abandon him. If he recognizes this as a trigger connected to earlier experiences of feeling unimportant, he can respond to his friend calmly, expressing his feelings honestly, instead of lashing out or withdrawing completely. This does not mean his feelings are invalid. It means he is choosing to communicate from a grounded place instead of an activated one. Understand that recognizing your triggers is not about becoming a robot who feels nothing. It is about becoming someone who feels everything clearly enough to respond with intention, rather than being hijacked without warning. Your emotions are messengers, not dictators. They deserve to be heard, examined, and understood, but they do not deserve unlimited control over your words, your decisions, and your relationships. Start building this awareness today. Keep a small note on your phone or in a journal, and every time you notice a reaction that feels stronger than the situation calls for, write down what happened right before it, how your body felt, and what old memory or feeling it might connect to. Over weeks and months, patterns will emerge. You will start to see the same 2 or 3 triggers appearing again and again in different disguises, wearing different faces, but always rooted in the same old wound. This awareness becomes your armor, not armor that blocks you from feeling, but armor that gives you the space to choose your response before your history chooses it for you. The people who move through life with steady, grounded reactions are not people who lack triggers. They are people who have taken the time to know their own triggers so intimately that almost nothing catches them by surprise anymore. This is available to you too, starting with the very next moment something unexpected happens and stirs something inside you. Notice it, name it, and then decide, consciously, what you want to do next. Chapter 3. Build unbreakable discipline through small, consistent daily actions. There is a quiet lie that keeps millions of people stuck exactly where they are, and it sounds so reasonable that almost nobody questions it. The lie says that discipline is something you either have or you do not, that some people are simply born with iron willpower while others are born lacking it. This lie feels comforting because it removes responsibility. If discipline is just a trait some people got and others did not, then you are off the hook for not having built it yet. But this lie is costing you the life you actually want, because the truth is far more empowering and far more demanding at the same time. Discipline is not a trait. It is a skill built through repetition, the same way a muscle grows through repeated resistance, not through a single burst of effort. Picture someone who wakes up every single day at 5 in the morning without fail, who eats the same clean meals week after week, who shows up to train even when their body is tired and their motivation is nowhere to be found. People look at this person and say they must have incredible willpower, as if willpower were some rare gift handed out unevenly at birth. But if you could rewind their story to the very beginning, you would find someone who struggled just as much as anyone else on their very first day. The difference is not that discipline came easily to them. The difference is that they kept showing up on the days it felt impossible, and each time they did, the behavior became a little less impossible than before. This is the secret that almost nobody wants to hear, because it removes every excuse. Discipline is built through small actions repeated so consistently that they eventually stop requiring effort at all. Nobody builds unbreakable discipline by attempting a massive, dramatic transformation overnight. In fact, this is usually where people fail the hardest. They decide on January 1st that they will wake up at 4 in the morning, eliminate every unhealthy food from their kitchen, work out for 2 hours daily, and read 50 pages every night, all starting on the very same day. For about a week, pure motivation carries them forward. But motivation is an unreliable fuel. It rises and falls like weather, and the moment it dips, which it always does, the entire system collapses, because none of these habits were ever given the chance to become natural. Real discipline is built the opposite way. It starts embarrassingly small, so small that your mind cannot generate excuses against it. If you want to build the habit of exercise, you do not start by promising yourself an hour at the gym every day. You start by promising yourself 10 push-ups each morning, something so small that skipping it would feel more ridiculous than doing it. If you want to build a reading habit, you do not commit to 50 pages a night. You commit to 1 single page. This might sound too small to matter, and that feeling of doubt is exactly the trap most people fall into. They believe small actions are not worth their time, so they either do nothing or attempt too much, and both paths lead to the same place: quitting. Here is why starting small actually works, and why it works far better than starting big. Your brain resists dramatic change because dramatic change requires enormous energy and disrupts patterns it has grown comfortable with. But small actions slip past this resistance almost unnoticed. 10 push-ups do not threaten your identity or demand painful sacrifice. 1 page does not feel like a burden. And because these actions are so small, you actually do them day after day, and this consistency is what builds the muscle of discipline itself. The size of the action barely matters in the beginning. What matters is that you did it today, and you will do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, until doing it becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth. Consider what happens after 30 days of 10 push-ups every morning without exception. On paper, this seems like an unimpressive habit, barely worth mentioning. But something far more important has happened beneath the surface. You have proven to yourself 30 separate times that your word to yourself means something. You have trained your mind to expect follow-through instead of expecting failure. This matters more than the physical strength gained from the push-ups themselves, because this trust in yourself becomes the foundation upon which every future habit gets built. Once your mind believes that you keep promises to yourself, growing that habit into something larger becomes far easier, because you are no longer fighting years of broken commitments working against you. This is where most people misunderstand the entire process of building discipline. They believe the goal is the outcome, the six-pack, the finished manuscript, the promotion at work. But the actual goal, the one that determines whether you achieve any of those outcomes, is becoming a person who does what they say they will do, regardless of mood, regardless of circumstances, regardless of how inconvenient the timing feels. Once you become that person in one small area of life, that identity spreads naturally into other areas, because you start to see yourself differently. You stop being someone who tries things and quits. You become someone who commits and follows through. Real-world application of this principle requires patience that most people are not willing to give themselves, because results are slow and often invisible in the beginning. Think of a man who wants to save money but has failed at budgeting for years. Instead of creating an elaborate financial plan that demands drastic lifestyle changes overnight, he commits to setting aside a single amount each week, small enough that he will not talk himself out of it, transferring it automatically so he never has to rely on willpower in the moment of temptation. Weeks pass, and the amount in his savings account remains modest, hardly worth celebrating. But 6 months later, something has shifted. He has proven to himself, week after week, that he can follow through on financial commitments, and this proof becomes the platform from which he begins increasing the amount, adjusting his spending, and making larger financial decisions with newfound confidence. Or picture a woman who has always wanted to write a book, but has never gotten past the first few pages, drowning under the pressure of writing entire chapters in single sittings. Instead of forcing herself into unsustainable 4-hour writing sessions, she commits to writing for just 10 minutes every single day, regardless of how she feels, regardless of whether inspiration has shown up. Some days those 10 minutes produce nothing worth keeping, but she shows up anyway, because the goal is not perfect output every day. The goal is protecting the habit itself from being broken. A year later, without ever having a single heroic writing session, she has accumulated enough pages to have written an entire book, built entirely from 10 minutes at a time. Understand that consistency will always outperform intensity over any meaningful stretch of time. A person who trains for 20 minutes daily for a year will build more strength and endurance than someone who trains for 3 intense hours once a week and skips the rest. A person who reads 10 pages daily will finish more books in a year than someone who binge reads occasionally and abandons the habit during busy weeks. This is not because small daily actions are inherently more powerful than large occasional ones. It is because small daily actions actually get done, while large occasional efforts collapse under the weight of their own demands the moment life gets difficult, which it always eventually does. There will be days where even the smallest commitment feels impossible. You will be exhausted, overwhelmed, grieving, sick, or simply out of motivation entirely. On these days, the goal shifts from growth to survival of the habit itself. If your commitment was 10 push-ups, and today you can only manage 2, do the 2. If your commitment was writing 10 minutes, and today you can only manage 2 minutes of scattered, messy words, write those 2 minutes. The number matters far less than the unbroken chain of showing up. Breaking the chain even once makes it exponentially easier to break it again, because your mind learns that the commitment is negotiable. Protecting the chain, even in its smallest possible form, teaches your mind the opposite lesson, that this commitment is non-negotiable no matter what. Discipline built this way becomes unbreakable, not because you never face resistance, but because you have trained yourself to act regardless of resistance. The feeling of not wanting to do something stops being a valid reason to skip it, because you have proven to yourself hundreds of times that the feeling passes the moment you begin, and the discomfort of starting is always smaller than the regret of quitting. This is not about forcing yourself through misery every single day. Over time, these small actions stop feeling like discomfort altogether and start feeling like identity, simply part of who you are. The same way brushing your teeth requires no internal debate because it has become entirely automatic. Begin today and begin smaller than feels necessary. Choose one habit that matters to you, something connected to the life you actually want to build, and shrink your commitment down until it feels almost too easy to skip. Then protect that small commitment fiercely, treating it as a promise made to someone you deeply respect, because that is exactly what it is. Every single day you follow through, no matter how small the action, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming. Cast enough of these votes, day after day, and eventually you will look back and realize that unbreakable discipline was never about massive willpower or rare motivation. It was simply about showing up, one small action at a time, until showing up became who you are. Chapter 4. Silence your impulses and choose long-term rewards instead. Right now, in this exact moment, you are surrounded by an invisible war that most people never even realize they are fighting. It is the war between what you want right now and what you actually want most. These two things feel like they should be the same, but they are almost never aligned, and learning to tell them apart is one of the most valuable skills a person can ever develop. The snack you reach for without thinking, the show you watch instead of sleeping, the purchase you make to feel better for an hour. None of these things are what you actually want. They are what your impulses want, and your impulses have a very short memory and an even shorter attention span. An impulse is not evil. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is simply a signal, often ancient and automatic, telling you to seek comfort, pleasure, or relief as quickly as possible. Thousands of years ago, this instinct kept people alive, pushing them to eat when food was scarce, to rest when energy was low, to avoid unnecessary risk. But the world you live in today is nothing like the world that built this instinct. Food is everywhere, entertainment is endless, and comfort is available at the tap of a screen. The instinct that once protected you now works against you constantly, whispering that relief right now matters more than anything waiting for you later. The problem is not that impulses exist. The problem is that most people never learn to separate the impulse from the decision. They feel the pull towards something and immediately act on it, as if the feeling itself were an order that must be obeyed. But a feeling is not an order. A feeling is simply information passing through you, here for a moment and gone the next, unless you choose to act on it. The moment you understand this, everything changes, because you realize you are not required to do everything you feel like doing. You are only required to notice the feeling and then decide, with a clear mind, whether acting on it actually serves the life you are trying to build. Consider what happens inside a person's mind right before they make a choice they will regret later. A man decides to skip his workout because his body feels tired and the couch feels irresistibly comfortable. In that exact moment, skipping feels like the obviously correct choice. His body is signaling exhaustion, his mind is offering a dozen reasonable excuses, and the short-term relief of staying seated feels enormous. But if you ask that same man 3 hours later, after the impulse has passed, whether he wishes he had gone, the honest answer is almost always yes. This gap between what a person wants in the heat of the moment and what they wish they had chosen afterward is where impulse control lives or dies. This is why relying on motivation alone will always fail you eventually. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are unreliable, shifting from hour to hour based on sleep, stress, hunger, and 100 other factors outside your control. Waiting to feel motivated before doing the hard thing is like waiting for perfect weather before leaving the house. Sometimes it comes, but often it does not, and building your entire life around an unreliable feeling guarantees inconsistency. What you need instead is a system that works regardless of how you feel in any given moment, because the goal is never to eliminate impulses entirely. The goal is to create enough space between the impulse and your action that your long-term values get a chance to speak before your short-term feelings decide everything. One of the most effective tools for creating this space is incredibly simple, and yet almost nobody uses it consistently. It is the 10-minute rule. When an impulse strikes, whether it is the urge to buy something you do not need, eat something that will leave you feeling worse afterward, or quit something difficult halfway through, commit to waiting exactly 10 minutes before acting on it. During those 10 minutes, do something else entirely. Walk to another room, drink a glass of water, step outside for fresh air. This waiting period feels unbearable at first, almost pointless, because the impulse screams that it needs satisfaction immediately. But impulses are like waves. They rise sharply, peak, and then fall, usually within minutes, if you simply give them the chance to pass, instead of feeding them the moment they appear. Another powerful practice is asking yourself a single question the instant you notice an impulse rising. Will this decision make my life better in a year, or will it only make the next 10 minutes more comfortable? This question cuts through the fog that impulses create, because impulses thrive on keeping your focus locked onto the immediate present, refusing to let you consider anything beyond right now. The moment you force your mind to zoom out, even slightly, the impulse loses much of its grip. A dessert that felt irresistible 30 seconds ago suddenly feels far less important when weighed against a year of consistent healthy choices. A reckless purchase feels far less urgent when weighed against a year of financial stability you are trying to build. Understand that choosing long-term rewards over short-term impulses is rarely about having more willpower than other people. It is about designing your environment so that willpower is needed far less often. If keeping unhealthy snacks in your house forces you to rely on willpower every single evening, remove them from the house entirely, so the choice is made once at the grocery store instead of fought repeatedly every night. If checking your phone the moment you wake up derails your entire morning, place your phone in another room overnight, so the impulse never has the chance to strike before your day has even begun. Discipline is easier to sustain when you stop relying on constant internal battles and instead build a life where fewer battles need to be fought at all. Real-world application of this principle shows up in nearly every corner of daily life. Picture someone building a business, sitting at their desk, feeling the pull to check social media instead of finishing an important task. That pull feels harmless in the moment, just a few minutes of scrolling, nothing serious. But those few minutes, repeated dozens of times throughout the day, quietly consume hours that should have gone toward building the very future this person claims to want. The person who recognizes this impulse, pauses, and chooses to close the app and return to the task is not superhuman. They have simply trained themselves to notice the gap between impulse and action, and to fill that gap with a decision aligned with their actual goals instead of their momentary comfort. Or picture someone in a relationship feeling the sharp impulse to send an angry message the moment a conflict arises, wanting the immediate satisfaction of expressing frustration before it has even fully settled. Sending that message might feel deeply satisfying for about 30 seconds, but hours or days later, when the relationship has been damaged by words that cannot be unsent, the long-term cost becomes painfully clear. The person who waits, who lets the initial wave of emotion pass before responding, often finds that what they actually wanted to say looks completely different once a clear mind has had time to think it through. Choosing long-term rewards requires you to become someone who can tolerate short-term discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. This tolerance is a muscle, and like every muscle, it grows stronger through repeated use. Every time you feel an impulse and choose not to act on it immediately, you are strengthening this muscle. Every time you give in without question, you are weakening it. Over time, the compound effect of these small choices becomes enormous, shaping the entire trajectory of your health, your finances, your relationships, and your sense of self-respect. None of this means punishing yourself for every impulse you feel, or living a joyless life devoid of pleasure and spontaneity. Rest matters, enjoyment matters, treating yourself occasionally matters. The goal is not to eliminate impulses, but to stop being ruled by them without question. There is a profound difference between someone who chooses to enjoy dessert because they decided it fits into their life, and someone who eats dessert because they could not resist the impulse in the moment. The outcome might look identical from the outside, but the internal experience and the pattern it reinforces could not be more different. Start today by simply noticing your impulses instead of immediately obeying them. When you feel the pull toward something, pause and name it silently to yourself. This is an impulse for comfort. This is an impulse for instant relief. Naming it creates the smallest sliver of distance between you and the urge, and that sliver is often all you need to make a clear choice, instead of an automatic one. Practice the 10-minute rule whenever possible. Ask yourself whether a choice serves the next 10 minutes or the next 10 years. Redesign your environment so fewer temptations demand your willpower throughout the day. These small, repeated acts of choosing the future over the present moment are how long-term rewards are actually built, one silenced impulse at a time. Chapter 5. Strengthen your willpower by facing discomfort every single day. Somewhere along the way, most people were taught a dangerous idea without ever realizing it happened. They were taught that comfort is the goal of life, that the point of working hard is to eventually arrive at a place where nothing feels difficult anymore. This idea sounds appealing on the surface, but it quietly destroys people from the inside, because a life built entirely around comfort produces a person who cannot handle even the smallest amount of friction the moment it appears. Willpower is not something you find once and keep forever. It is something you either strengthen or weaken every single day, depending on how you respond to discomfort in that day's ordinary moments. Think about what happens to a muscle that is never challenged. It does not stay the same. It weakens, slowly and quietly, until even light activity becomes difficult. Willpower behaves in exactly the same way. Every time you avoid discomfort, choosing the easier option simply because it is easier, you are not preserving your strength for some future moment when you will really need it. You are actually training yourself to collapse the instant things become hard. And then, when a real challenge arrives, a job loss, an illness, a relationship crisis, you find yourself completely unprepared because you spent years avoiding the very discomfort that would have built the strength you now desperately need. This is why deliberately facing discomfort, on purpose, in small doses, every single day, is one of the most important things you can do for your entire life. Not because suffering is noble for its own sake, and not because pain should be worshipped. Discomfort matters because it is the exact mechanism through which strength gets built, in your body, in your mind, and in your character. There is no version of a strong, capable, resilient person who arrived there without repeatedly choosing the harder path when the easier one was sitting right in front of them. Consider cold water. Something as simple as ending your shower with 30 seconds of cold water might seem like a strange place to start building willpower, but it works precisely because it is uncomfortable in a controlled, safe, low-stakes way. Standing under cold water, every cell in your body screaming to turn the temperature back to something pleasant and choosing to stay there anyway, teaches your mind something profound. It teaches you that discomfort is survivable. It teaches you that the voice inside your head, demanding immediate relief, does not actually have to be obeyed. This lesson, learned in a shower, transfers into every other area of your life, because your mind does not fully distinguish between different types of discomfort. It simply learns whether you tend to give in or push through, and that pattern follows you everywhere. Physical exercise offers another daily opportunity to practice this exact skill, not for the sake of building muscle alone, but for the mental training that happens during the moment your body wants to stop and you choose to continue anyway. The final repetitions of a workout, the ones where your muscles burn and your mind starts negotiating for an early finish, are worth far more than the easy repetitions at the beginning. Those final difficult moments are where willpower actually gets built. Skipping them because they are hard defeats the entire purpose of showing up in the first place. Fasting, even something as simple as delaying your first meal by a few hours, creates another daily opportunity to sit with discomfort instead of immediately eliminating it. Hunger arrives, your mind starts producing urgent thoughts about food, and normally you would respond instantly, reaching for something to eat the moment the sensation appears. But choosing to wait, choosing to notice the hunger without immediately obeying it, teaches your body and mind that sensations do not require instant action. This single lesson, hunger does not have to control me, quietly rewires how you respond to every other urge you encounter throughout your day. Waking up earlier than necessary, even by just 30 minutes, provides one of the most reliable daily training grounds for willpower that exists. The alarm goes off, the bed feels warm, the room feels cold, and every part of your body wants to stay exactly where it is. Choosing to get up anyway, in that exact moment of resistance, is a small victory that compounds over time, in ways that are difficult to overstate. You are not just gaining 30 extra minutes in your day. You are proving to yourself, every single morning, that you are someone who does the hard thing, even when nobody is watching, and no one would ever know if you chose comfort instead. Difficult conversations offer a different kind of discomfort, one that many people avoid for years. Telling someone the truth when a lie would be easier, setting a boundary with someone who will not like it, addressing a conflict instead of pretending it does not exist. All of these moments demand willpower in a form that has nothing to do with physical endurance. The discomfort here is emotional rather than physical, but the mechanism is identical. Every time you avoid the hard conversation, you weaken your capacity to handle discomfort. Every time you choose to have it anyway, speaking honestly, even though your voice shakes and your stomach tightens, you strengthen a different kind of muscle, one that will serve you in every relationship you will ever have. Understand something important about this entire process. The goal is never to seek out suffering for the sake of suffering, or to punish yourself unnecessarily. The goal is to stop automatically avoiding every form of discomfort the instant it appears, because a life spent avoiding all discomfort produces a person who is fragile, easily overwhelmed, and unable to handle the inevitable hardships that life will eventually bring, regardless of how carefully you tried to avoid them. Choosing small, controlled doses of discomfort on your own terms, in a cold shower, in a hard workout, in an honest conversation, prepares you for the uncontrolled discomfort life will eventually throw at you without asking permission. Real-world application of this principle becomes clear when you consider two different people facing the exact same crisis. A sudden financial emergency hits both of their households at the same time. One person has spent years avoiding every uncomfortable financial conversation, ignoring their bank statements, spending impulsively whenever stress appeared, never once building the mental muscle required to sit with financial discomfort and think clearly through it. When the emergency arrives, this person panics, makes rushed decisions, and often makes the situation significantly worse. The other person has spent years practicing discomfort deliberately, facing hard truths early instead of avoiding them, sitting with financial stress long enough to think clearly instead of reacting emotionally. When the same emergency arrives, this person feels the same fear, the same tightness in their chest, but they have built the capacity to function despite that discomfort, instead of being paralyzed by it. Or consider two athletes preparing for the same competition. One has trained only within their comfort zone, stopping the moment exercises became genuinely difficult, always choosing the lighter weight, the shorter distance, the easier version of every workout. The other has spent months deliberately pushing into uncomfortable territory, finishing workouts that left them shaking, running the extra distance even when their body begged them to stop. When competition day arrives and real adversity appears, fatigue setting in far earlier than expected, an unexpected setback disrupting their plan, only one of these athletes has actually trained for this moment. The other has only trained for a version of competition that never demands anything difficult, which is not how competition, or life, actually works. Willpower strengthened through daily discomfort does not eliminate difficulty from your life. It changes your relationship with difficulty entirely. Hard things still feel hard. Uncomfortable moments still feel uncomfortable. But instead of these feelings triggering panic, avoidance, or collapse, they trigger a quiet, practiced confidence that says, "I have done hard things before, and I can do this too." This confidence is not arrogance. It is evidence, built through repetition, that you are capable of more than your comfort zone has ever allowed you to discover. Start today by choosing one small, deliberate discomfort to practice, something manageable but genuinely uncomfortable, whether that is 30 seconds of cold water, one difficult conversation you have been postponing, or waking up slightly earlier than your body wants to. Do not wait until you feel ready, because readiness is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable, especially when facing something uncomfortable. Choose the action regardless of how you feel about it in that moment. Repeat this choice daily, not occasionally, not only when you happen to feel strong, but every single day, especially on the days you feel weakest, because those are the days this practice matters most. Over time, something remarkable happens. The discomfort that once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable. The voice inside your head that used to win every argument, convincing you to quit, to avoid, to choose the easier path, starts losing its power over you. You begin to trust yourself in a way that comfort alone could never have taught you. This trust becomes the foundation of everything you build from this point forward, because a person who has proven to themselves that they can handle discomfort is a person who can handle almost anything life decides to bring their way. Chapter 6. Replace bad habits with powerful habits that serve you. Every single habit you have, the good ones and the destructive ones, exists for one simple reason. It works. This sounds strange to say about a habit that hurts you, but it is the truth that most people never stop to examine. Nobody scrolls their phone for 3 hours because they enjoy wasting time. They do it because in some way that habit is solving a problem, offering distraction from boredom, escape from stress, or a small hit of comfort when life feels heavy. Nobody smokes because they love the smell or the cost. They do it because the habit delivers something, a moment of calm, a sense of control, a brief pause from anxiety. Every bad habit is a flawed solution to a real problem, and this single realization changes everything about how you should approach removing one from your life. Most people try to break a bad habit by focusing entirely on willpower, gritting their teeth and forcing themselves to simply stop. This approach fails far more often than it succeeds, not because the person lacks discipline, but because it ignores the actual reason the habit exists in the first place. If you remove a habit without addressing the need it was fulfilling, that need does not disappear. It waits, quietly, for a new outlet, and often finds one that is just as harmful, or returns to the original habit the moment your willpower runs low, which it inevitably will on a hard day. The far more effective approach is not simply removing a bad habit, but replacing it with something that meets the same underlying need in a way that actually serves your life, instead of damaging it. Every habit follows a simple pattern. Something triggers you, a feeling of stress, a specific time of day, a particular location, or being around certain people. This trigger leads to a routine, the actual behavior you perform, and that routine delivers a reward, some kind of relief, pleasure, or comfort that reinforces the entire loop, making you more likely to repeat it the next time the trigger appears. If you want to change a habit permanently, you cannot simply remove the routine and hope for the best. You have to keep the same trigger, keep the reward the trigger is seeking, and change only the behavior sitting in the middle. Consider someone who reaches for junk food every evening around 9 at night. Trying to simply stop eating at 9 through willpower alone often fails within a week or two, because the underlying need driving that habit was never addressed. Perhaps the real trigger is not hunger at all, but boredom, or exhaustion after a long day, or a craving for a small moment of pleasure after hours of responsibility. Once this person identifies the actual need being met, comfort after a demanding day, they can find a new routine that delivers a similar reward without the damage. Herbal tea, prepared with the same ritual care, a short walk outside, a few minutes reading something enjoyable, all of these can deliver the comfort being sought without the consequences of the original habit. The trigger stays the same, 9 at night still arrives daily, but the routine sitting between the trigger and the reward has been swapped for something that actually serves the life this person is trying to build. This same framework applies to nearly every destructive habit imaginable. Someone who reaches for their phone the moment anxiety rises is not actually addicted to the phone itself. They are addicted to the temporary relief that scrolling provides from an uncomfortable internal feeling. Replacing the habit requires finding something else that offers relief from that same anxious feeling, whether that is a few minutes of deep breathing, stepping outside for fresh air, or calling a friend instead of numbing out through a screen. The anxiety was never really about the phone, and removing the phone without addressing the anxiety simply pushes the same discomfort toward a different, potentially worse outlet. Understanding the reward your bad habit provides requires honest self-examination, something most people skip entirely because it feels uncomfortable to admit. Sit with the habit you want to change and ask yourself directly, what am I actually getting from this? Not what you think you should be getting or what sounds reasonable, but what you are truly getting in that exact moment. Is it comfort? Is it escape? Is it a feeling of control in a life that otherwise feels chaotic? Is it connection, even a false kind, with something that never judges you back? Once you name the real reward honestly, you can start searching for healthier routines capable of delivering that same reward without the long-term cost attached to the original habit. Building a new habit to replace the old one requires making the new behavior as easy and accessible as the destructive one used to be. This is where many well-intentioned attempts fail. If someone decides to replace late-night snacking with journaling, but their journal is buried in a drawer somewhere while their snacks sit visible on the kitchen counter, the outcome is predictable before it even begins. Willpower cannot compete with convenience over the long run. Make the new habit obvious and easy to access, and make the old habit as inconvenient as possible. Move the snacks out of sight. Place the journal directly on your pillow so you cannot avoid seeing it. Remove the games from your phone's home screen and replace that space with something that reflects who you are trying to become. Identity plays an enormous role in whether a new habit actually sticks or eventually fades away. Most people try to change their behavior first, hoping their identity will eventually catch up. But lasting change usually works in the opposite direction. Decide first who you want to become, and then let your daily actions serve as evidence supporting that identity. Instead of telling yourself you are trying to quit smoking, start telling yourself, I am not a smoker anymore. Instead of saying you are trying to exercise more, start saying, I am someone who moves their body every single day. This shift in language feels small, almost insignificant, but it changes the entire psychological framing of the habit. You are no longer fighting against your own nature every time you choose the new behavior. You are simply acting in alignment with who you have already decided you are. Real-world application of this principle becomes clear through a man who spent years relying on alcohol to unwind after stressful workdays. Simply removing alcohol from his life without addressing the underlying need for decompression left him irritable and restless every evening, until he eventually returned to his old pattern out of sheer discomfort. The turning point came when he identified what he was truly seeking, a clear transition between the stress of work and the calm of home. He built a new routine around this exact need, changing his clothes immediately upon walking through the door, taking a 15-minute walk regardless of weather, and preparing a specific drink he genuinely enjoyed that had nothing to do with alcohol. The trigger, arriving home stressed, remained the same. The reward, feeling the transition from work mode into home mode, remained the same. Only the routine in between had changed, and this time, the change actually lasted. Or consider a woman who habitually procrastinated on important tasks by cleaning her entire house instead, using cleaning as a socially acceptable form of avoidance whenever anxiety about a difficult project appeared. Rather than forcing herself to sit and work through pure willpower alone, she recognized that cleaning was providing her with a feeling of control and productivity during moments of anxiety, even though it was misdirected control. She replaced this pattern by breaking her difficult tasks into extremely small first steps, small enough that starting felt as easy and controllable as picking up a broom. The anxiety trigger remained, the need for a feeling of control remained, but the routine shifted from avoidance disguised as productivity into genuine progress on the task that actually mattered. Patience matters enormously throughout this entire process, because replacing a deeply ingrained habit rarely happens instantly. There will be days the old habit calls loudly, and there will be moments you slip back into it despite your best efforts. This does not mean the process has failed. It means you are human, engaged in genuine change, rather than performing an illusion of perfection. What matters is returning to the new routine as quickly as possible after a slip, rather than allowing one difficult day to unravel weeks of progress. Each time you choose the new routine over the old one, even imperfectly, even after a setback, you are strengthening new neural pathways that eventually become as automatic as the destructive ones once were. Understand that every bad habit currently running your life was built through repetition, and it can be unbuilt the exact same way, through repetition of something better. You are not fighting against a permanent flaw in your character when you struggle to change a habit. You are simply working against grooves worn deep by years of practice, grooves that can be filled in and replaced by new ones through consistent, patient effort applied in the right direction. The habits governing your life right now are not fixed truths about who you are. They are patterns you have practiced, and any pattern that has been practiced can eventually be replaced by a better one, practiced with equal consistency, until it becomes the new automatic response your mind reaches for without you even having to think about it. Chapter 7. Stay calm under pressure and respond instead of reacting. There is a specific moment that reveals more about a person's character than almost anything else in life, and it has nothing to do with how they behave when everything is going well. It happens the instant pressure hits without warning, the instant something goes wrong faster than the mind can process. A car swerves unexpectedly. A client delivers devastating news in the middle of a meeting. A loved one says something cutting in the heat of an argument. In these narrow windows of time, a person's true nature shows itself, not because pressure creates character, but because pressure reveals whatever character was already quietly built long before that moment arrived. Most people believe that staying calm under pressure is a personality trait, something certain lucky individuals were simply born with, while everyone else is doomed to panic whenever life turns difficult. This belief is comforting in the same way blaming genetics for a weak body is comforting, because it removes the responsibility to actually train for something better. But the truth is far more useful than this excuse allows. The ability to remain steady during chaos is a skill, built through specific, repeatable practices, and anyone willing to train it consistently can develop it, regardless of how reactive they have been throughout their entire life up until now. There is a critical difference between reacting and responding, And understanding this difference changes how you experience every difficult moment for the rest of your life. Reacting is automatic, instant, and driven entirely by whatever emotion is loudest in that particular second. It happens before thought has any chance to intervene, controlled by ancient parts of the brain designed for physical survival rather than modern problem-solving. Responding, on the other hand, involves a pause, however brief, between the stimulus and the action that follows it. Inside that pause lives the entire difference between a life dictated by circumstances and a life directed by intention. Pressure activates your body in very specific, predictable ways, and understanding this physical process removes much of its power over you. The moment something threatening or overwhelming appears, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, your muscles tense, and your thinking narrows sharply, focused entirely on the perceived threat in front of you. This response served your ancestors well when facing physical danger that required immediate fight or flight. But in a world where most pressure comes from emails, conversations, and unexpected news rather than physical predators, this same response often works against you, flooding your body with urgency while clouding the very clear thinking you actually need in that moment. The first and most powerful tool for interrupting this automatic response is breath, and its effectiveness cannot be overstated, despite how simple it sounds. When pressure strikes, your breathing becomes shallow almost instantly, which further signals to your nervous system that danger is present, creating a feedback loop that intensifies your panic rather than calming it. Deliberately slowing your breath breaks this loop directly. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold that breath for a count of 4. Then release it slowly through your mouth for a count of 6, making the exhale longer than the inhale. This specific pattern signals safety to your nervous system in a way that words alone cannot achieve, because it works on a physical level that bypasses your racing thoughts entirely. Beyond breath, creating physical distance from the triggering situation, even for a few seconds, provides enormous value. If someone says something that ignites anger in a meeting, excusing yourself briefly, even just to get water or step into the hallway, interrupts the automatic reactive chain before it fully takes over. This is not avoidance or weakness. It is a strategic pause that allows your rational mind to catch up to your racing emotions, so that whatever you say or do next comes from clarity rather than the heat of an activated nervous system. Language matters more than most people realize during high-pressure moments, both the language you use internally and the language you choose to speak aloud. Internally, the story you tell yourself in the middle of a crisis shapes your entire experience of it. Telling yourself that everything is falling apart, that this is a disaster, that you cannot handle this, actively amplifies your panic and narrows your ability to think clearly. Replacing this internal narrative with something steadier, even something as simple as reminding yourself that this is difficult but survivable, and that you have handled hard things before, calms your nervous system enough to access the parts of your brain responsible for actual problem-solving rather than pure alarm. Externally, the words you choose during pressure-filled moments carry weight far beyond the moment itself. Speaking slowly, even artificially slowing your pace when your instinct is to rush, signals calm both to the people around you and back to your own nervous system. A person who speaks quickly during a crisis often escalates the tension in the room, while a person who deliberately slows their speech, even slightly, brings a steadiness that others instinctively respond to. This is not about suppressing urgency when urgency is genuinely needed. It is about ensuring that your words come from clear thinking rather than panic, because panic rarely produces the best possible solution to any problem. Real-world application of this principle appears constantly in high-stakes professions, and studying how people in these fields train for pressure offers valuable lessons for everyday life. Emergency responders, surgeons, and pilots do not remain calm because they feel no fear in dangerous situations. They remain calm because they have rehearsed their responses so thoroughly that their bodies default to trained procedure rather than raw panic, even when their heart rate has spiked just as high as anyone else's would in that same situation. This reveals something profoundly hopeful for anyone trying to build this skill in ordinary life. Calm is not the absence of fear. Calm is the presence of a trained, practiced response that fear cannot easily override. Consider a woman receiving an unexpected phone call, delivering devastating news about her health. Her first instinct is a wave of fear so intense it threatens to overwhelm every rational thought in her mind. If she reacts purely from this fear, she might spiral into panic, make rushed decisions, or shut down entirely, unable to process what comes next. But if she has practiced pausing before reacting, even in far smaller everyday moments, she finds herself able to take one slow breath before speaking, ask clarifying questions calmly despite the storm inside her chest, and begin thinking through actual next steps instead of drowning entirely in the emotion of the moment. The fear does not disappear, it simply no longer controls every word and decision that follows. Or picture a business owner facing a furious client, voice raised, accusations flying, threatening to end a partnership that took years to build. The instinct to react defensively, to raise his own voice, to justify himself immediately, burns strongly in that moment. But years of deliberately practicing the pause between stimulus and response allow him to take a breath, lower his own voice deliberately rather than matching the client's volume, and respond with a calm question instead of a defensive statement. This single choice, born from practiced restraint rather than natural ease, often de-escalates situations that would otherwise spiral into permanent damage. Building this skill requires practicing it in small, low-stakes situations long before you need it in the moments that truly matter. Every minor frustration throughout your day, traffic that moves too slowly, a comment that stings slightly, a plan that falls through unexpectedly, offers a training ground for this exact muscle. Instead of reacting instantly to these small daily frustrations, practice the pause, practice the breath, practice choosing your response deliberately even when the stakes are low. This daily practice builds the neural pathway that will be available to you automatically when a genuinely high-pressure moment eventually arrives, because you cannot expect calm under extreme pressure if you have never practiced calm under mild pressure first. Understand that staying calm does not mean suppressing every emotion you feel or pretending difficult situations do not affect you. It means allowing yourself to feel the full weight of a moment while still maintaining enough clarity to choose your next action wisely, instead of letting raw emotion choose it for you. This distinction matters enormously because a person who suppresses everything eventually breaks under the accumulated pressure, while a person who feels everything but responds deliberately builds genuine resilience that compounds over time, growing stronger with every difficult moment they move through with intention instead of panic. Start practicing this today in whatever small pressures your day happens to bring. Notice the instant your body tightens in response to something frustrating or unexpected. Breathe slowly before speaking or acting. Ask yourself what response, rather than what reaction, actually serves you and the outcome you want in this specific situation. Over time, this practice becomes less of a conscious effort and more of an automatic default, until the moments that once sent you spiraling into panic instead find you standing steady, thinking clearly, and choosing your next move with the calm confidence of someone who has trained for exactly this. Chapter 8. Protect your energy by setting firm personal boundaries daily. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. A tiredness that has nothing to do with physical rest and everything to do with the constant, quiet leaking of your energy into places it was never meant to go. You know this feeling. It shows up after a phone call with someone who only ever talks about themselves. It shows up after saying yes to a request you desperately wanted to decline. It shows up after spending an entire day available to everyone except yourself. This exhaustion is not a mystery. It is the direct result of living without boundaries, and it will continue draining you until you learn to protect what is actually yours to protect. Most people think of boundaries as walls, something cold and unfriendly, built to keep people out and relationships at arm's length. This misunderstanding keeps countless people trapped in patterns that slowly hollow them out from the inside. A boundary is not a wall. A boundary is a fence around a garden you are trying to grow. It does not exist to punish anyone standing outside it. It exists to protect what is growing inside it, so that the things you value, your time, your peace, your health, your relationships, actually have the conditions they need to flourish, instead of being trampled by whoever happens to walk by without asking permission. Consider how differently your life feels on the days you say yes without thinking, versus the days you pause and consider whether something actually fits into the life you are building. Every time you agree to something you did not want to do, purely because saying no felt uncomfortable, you are quietly teaching the people around you, and more importantly teaching yourself, that your own preferences do not matter enough to honor. This lesson compounds over time. The more you override your own needs to keep others comfortable, the more comfortable people become asking you to override them again, because you have shown them repeatedly that this is a request you will grant. The discomfort of setting a boundary is real, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Saying no to a friend who wants you to attend an event you have no energy for feels awkward. Telling a family member that a certain topic is off limits during dinner feels tense. Informing a coworker that you will not be answering messages after a certain hour feels like it might damage the relationship somehow. But here is the truth that changes everything once it fully lands. The discomfort of setting a boundary is temporary and specific, lasting only through the moment of stating it. The discomfort of living without boundaries is permanent and spreads into every corner of your life. Because a life without boundaries means your time, energy, and emotional well-being are constantly available for anyone who wants to take them, whether they realize they are taking or not. Understanding your own energy is the first step toward protecting it effectively. Not everyone drains you in the same way, and not every request costs you the same amount. Some situations restore you, even while requiring effort, like a difficult conversation with someone who genuinely respects you afterward, or physical work that leaves you tired but satisfied. Other situations drain you regardless of how little effort they seem to require on the surface, like spending time with someone who consistently criticizes you, or checking work messages during hours meant for rest. Learning to notice which specific situations, people, and habits leave you feeling depleted, rather than assuming all forms of tiredness are identical, allows you to target your boundaries where they actually matter most, instead of guessing blindly. Saying no does not require an elaborate explanation, even though most people believe it does. This belief keeps people trapped in over-explaining every boundary they attempt to set, offering excuses, apologies, and justifications until the other person eventually talks them out of the boundary entirely. A simple, calm no, delivered without excessive apology, communicates far more confidence and clarity than a lengthy explanation ever could. When someone asks for your time and it does not work for you, a direct response, "That does not work for me right now," carries more weight than a rambling paragraph explaining every reason why. The people who genuinely respect you will accept this without issue. The people who push back against a simple, respectful no are often exactly the people whose requests you needed a boundary against in the first place. There is a particular kind of guilt that arises the moment you begin setting boundaries after years of not having any. And this guilt deserves to be named honestly, because it catches so many people off guard. This guilt is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are doing something unfamiliar, something your nervous system has not yet learned to recognize as safe. People who have spent years prioritizing everyone else's comfort over their own often feel a genuine physical discomfort the first several times they say no, as though something bad is about to happen as a direct result. This feeling fades with repetition, the same way any unfamiliar action eventually feels normal once you have done it enough times. The guilt is not a signal to stop. It is simply proof that you are changing an old pattern, and old patterns rarely go quietly. Real-world application of boundaries shows up constantly in professional settings, where the pressure to remain endlessly available often masquerades as dedication or good work ethic. Consider someone who answers work emails at all hours, including late at night and throughout weekends, believing this constant availability proves their commitment to their job. Over months and years, this pattern produces exhaustion that eventually affects the very work quality this person was trying so hard to protect. Setting a firm boundary, choosing specific hours during which work communication will be answered, and holding to that boundary consistently, does not signal laziness or lack of dedication. It signals that this person understands sustainable performance requires actual recovery time, and that a mind constantly available is rarely a mind performing at its sharpest. Family relationships present some of the most difficult boundaries to set, precisely because the emotional stakes and history involved run so deep. Consider someone whose parent regularly makes critical comments about their life choices during every visit, leaving them feeling small and defeated for days afterward. Continuing to expose yourself to this pattern without any boundary, simply because the person involved is family, does not honor the relationship. It slowly poisons it, building quiet resentment that eventually surfaces in far more damaging ways than a calm, direct boundary ever would. Stating clearly that certain topics are no longer open for discussion, and following through by changing the subject or ending the conversation when the boundary is crossed, protects both your own well-being and the long-term health of the relationship itself. Because relationships built on one person's constant self-sacrifice rarely survive intact anyway. Boundaries around your own time deserve just as much protection as boundaries involving other people, because the way you treat your own schedule teaches everyone around you how to treat it as well. If you consistently allow your focused work time to be interrupted by anyone who happens to want your attention, you are training the people in your life to expect constant access to you, and training yourself to believe your own priorities are less important than whatever interruption just arrived. Protecting blocks of time for deep work, exercise, rest, or activities that genuinely restore you is not selfish. It is the exact mechanism through which you remain capable of showing up fully for the people and responsibilities that actually matter to you. Understand that boundaries are not a one-time announcement you make and then never revisit. They require consistent reinforcement, because people naturally test boundaries, sometimes without even realizing they are doing it, simply out of old habit or hope that the previous pattern might return. The first time someone crosses a boundary you have set, calmly restating it, without anger and without extensive justification, teaches them that this boundary is genuine, rather than a temporary phase that will eventually fade if they simply wait long enough. Consistency is what transforms a boundary from a hopeful suggestion into a reliable truth that people learn to respect over time. Protecting your energy through daily boundaries is ultimately an act of respect, both toward yourself and toward the people you interact with honestly. A person who sets clear boundaries is not someone who has stopped caring about others. They are someone who has finally started caring about themselves with the same seriousness they have always extended to everyone else. This shift changes the quality of every relationship you hold, because relationships built on one person's constant depletion are never as strong or as honest as relationships where both people show up with genuine energy, genuine presence, and genuine respect for what the other person actually needs in order to thrive.